Okay, welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. A lot of people, this is not just news reports, but a lot of people that I come in contact with, talk to, what have you, are getting increasingly scared shitless about Ukraine. You look at things that are going on. You have Russia suspending nuclear treaties. Yeah, they were testing an ICBM when Biden appeared in Poland. Um, I think people are scared shitless, and I think a lot of it has to do with Brandon in the White House. Not, I mean, people would be concerned. I mean, they're not oblivious, but when you have Brandon in the White House and then he falls up the stairs, which I've actually never done, fallen down a
And
stair or two,
this is the
but
second
never,
time
yeah.
he's fallen up the stairs.
Well, he continues to achieve.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think of my assertion that yes, it would be a concern, especially you have things like China now proposing arming Russia. Um, I think a lot of it has is centered on Brandon, and
To a cer-
Brandon falls again.
to a certain extent it
Not
is.
totally. I didn't mean
I mean,
totally.
yeah, no, not totally, but to a certain extent it is. China is cozying up to Russia. They've already been providing Russia with supplies, just not weaponry. Iran has been providing drones and weaponry.
Oh,
So
by the way, where did the drone technology come from? I
yeah,
forgot.
that was when they captured the U.S. drones during the Obama administration.
Okay, just I
Yeah.
forgot. Thank you.
But what's going on, and it's becoming more and more clear, is that, when Russia originally went into Ukraine, people looked at it the same way as when Russia took over Crimea. As time has gone on, people are realizing that that's not the comparison that they should be making. The accurate comparison at this point is Hitler going into Poland. It's not just Russia, it's Russia and Iran and China and North Korea. This is very possibly the start of a world war. And I think the important thing to realize is if the West had their act together in 1939 and stopped Hitler when he went into Poland, World War II may never have happened. So it's very important we not lose sight of the importance of stopping Russia before they take Ukraine or any other part of Eastern Europe. Now, what makes it really frightening is that people have no faith in Joe Biden. He is now a wartime president, and he is not the person you want in charge during war. Take a look at what he did with the Afghanistan withdrawal.
I think that is an exceptionally good point. Um, he's Chamberlain on steroids. I mean, Chamberlain made a lot of errors, but he was not cognitively impaired. You have someone that everyone knows he's not in church, and I have to throw something on top of it. That's where that increases the likelihood of miscalculations because he's certainly not in charge. So you're not having one person like a Kennedy. If Kennedy was Biden, okay, or vice versa, whatever, Kennedy put the brakes on a lot of crazy shit initiatives that could have gone and spun out into World War III. But I
Yes.
don't think Biden's capable of that.
No, he's really not. And I mean, let's just take a look at what he was saying when he was in Kiev earlier this week. He was talking about the fact that, he saw this coming and he's backing Ukraine fully. But of course, there was no mention of the fact that he gave Russia permission to do this when he said, oh, well, a minor incursion would be okay.
No question about it. And yes, if you're Putin, you take that as that's a green light. And Putin did think it'd be a lot easier, yes, but clearly a miscalculation. And let me just say that if it was Trump, it would be 24, and rightfully so, 24/7 CNN and CBS, but it kind of gets swept under the rug. He invited this, and I'm actually, I mean, I work every day, I function, whatever, but it's a little scary because there is no one in charge. Brandon is in charge, and that's should be
Yeah,
friggin' scary to anyone.
it is frightening. And let's not forget that rather than actually providing the arms that Ukraine originally asked for, Biden was pushing financial sanctions against Russia. Well, the sanctions did absolutely nothing, they had no effect. And Russia is still selling gas and oil around the world, and they're making a fortune doing it because Biden cut American production, causing prices to go up.
Okay, but that would mean that he would need to think strategically. First of all,
Which
that's an
clearly he's not. Yeah,
impossible. And second of all, he'd have to fight the environmental wackos. Basically, anyone who's logical would say, "Listen, I get the long-term view. Yes, we need to, put a cap on global warming, but for the time being, not only economically but geopolitically, we need to ramp up production." But because he's not calling the shots.
no, and the people who are calling the shots don't have a clue what they're doing either. I mean, we just talked about, it's the climate change lobby basically that's in control. But right now in Indonesia, there is a village called, I believe the name is Lakota. People are dying in Lakota. They're getting sick, they're dying. The environment in Lakota is an abject disaster. Was this the result of climate change? Was this the result of a toxic spill like in East Palestine? No. This is all the result of mining operations because that village is the chief supplier of electric vehicle batteries. And it's killing people. So the folks who are yelling about climate change, they don't really care about the environment. They're helping to destroy it. Where if we had actually doubled down on American energy production, which is cleaner than any energy production in the world, that would have had an effect on Russia. It would have pushed prices down. It would have kept them from selling as much. And that actually would have had more of an effect on the Ukrainian war than almost anything else.
I would agree with that. It's hard to break through a not just an ideology but a fixation. And again, it's all about who's in charge. And I think that's a rhetorical question because we know Biden is not. Speaking of not being in charge, we have Mayor Pete, another F up, kind of failing to go to the train wreck, which I believe he is. Now I've asked you this a couple times. Is this finally the end of Mayor Petey?
I hate to say it's the end because he keeps screwing up over and over again. And realistically, the only reason that he finally agreed to go to East Palestine is because Donald Trump is going there. I mean, so even as a former president, and yes, I really wish Trump would just pull out and not run again. But even as a former president, he is being more presidential than the idiots in charge now.
Yeah, I think there's been a list. This this could be. I don't see him having the. He got into the limelight. He got the spotlight, and he melted. This is not the first time. I don't see how. I
No,
know he checks the boxes, but
well,
everything
but
he's touched
that's
is he's
that's
screwed up.
that's the story of the entire Biden administration. Mayor Pete got the spotlight because he ticked boxes and he has failed over and over again. Kamala Harris got the spotlight because she ticked boxes and she has failed over and over again. The head of the Department of Education also was chosen because she ticked boxes. Now, Department of Education just announced they're going to try to roll back a Trump era rule that required colleges to protect freedom of religion if they wanted federal funds. So it's like, this is just the story of the Biden administration. They ticked off boxes with incompetent people, and now we are all paying the price.
And you know something? I'm sorry, that's just true. In every administration, you got the box checkers, right? But there's always a core of people that you can count on. For instance, Reagan, a long time ago. Yes, he was cognitively impaired in the end, at the final years of his administration. But you had Baker, you had Schultz, you had people that knew their shit. I don't get that sense.
No, but even more than that, with Reagan, Reagan reached across the aisle. He worked with Tip O'Neill. Biden's done nothing to reach across the aisle. He keeps claiming he wants unity, but at every chance he gets, he's blaming the Republicans for everything. Even Mayor Pete just this week said, "Well, the reason that the train in East Palestine crashed, it was the fault of the Trump administration." Really, the Trump administration's been out of office for 2 years. And on day one, Biden just went through reversing executive orders, getting rid of Trump era rules. So at this point, you can't blame the Trump administration. It's squarely on the Biden administration.
I would agree. You can, but no one's believing it
Well, yeah.
anymore. There you go. And it's just really kind of funny as well. Three prominent Democratic strategists have declined Biden's invitation to start his campaign. Not a lot of hope there, is there? And that dovetails into the whole thing that's been going on for a while. 33%, only 33% of Americans think America is going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that the Democratic strategists don't want to work on the campaign. Biden's support within the Democratic Party is a house of cards. It's there for show. They put up the facade, but there's nothing underneath it. And the only reason they're even putting up the facade is that they're terrified that Kamala Harris could become the Democratic flag bearer.
The only thing, by the way, that Biden did, and he did it by accident, trust me, that the only thing he did that required any kind of strategy was, in corporate they call it the poison pill. Yeah, if you had someone that was actually good, the Harold Ford who's on the five or so, people would be clamoring to get rid of the clown. But now
Absolutely.
you have double clown, so it's pretty much job security.
It really is. Nobody wants to see Harris in the Oval Office. Again, she was given the position because she ticked boxes, but honestly, I don't think anybody in the Democratic Party realized just how bad a job she was going to do. I think they were all taken aback.
I 100% agree with that. A lawyer, a prosecutor, you need to have some ounce of competency, but maybe it all goes back to checking boxes. I
Yeah,
don't know. For as they say, it's a bigger question than for us to answer, but it's sure looking that way, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
it really is.
Well, you did mention, well, that's all we've been talking about is incompetency. You talked about the Department of Education. Um, Amazing. We had the story in Baltimore that not 1% passed the standardized, I think it was math competency levels, but none. And that's,
No, yeah,
no, not, that's like
20
shocking.
yeah, in Baltimore,
And
22
Chicago now.
schools. Well, in Baltimore, 22 schools reported they had zero students that could hit grade proficiency in math. Now, this week, we've gotten the same basic report out of Chicago school systems. And these are not school systems that were skimping on what they were spending on education.
No, they were spending money like drunken sailors.
Yes,
Just
but
throwing like a Democrat,
apparently,
no, like Democrats do, just throwing money at a problem. Just who knows what it's for? Just throw some shit at the problem, and it's bound to work out, isn't it, Doctor Lopkin?
well, apparently not, because both of these cities have zero students that hit grade proficiency. And let's be clear here. We're not talking about young students. We're talking about eighth graders. If you're illiterate in the eighth grade,
Check,
there,
please.
there's a good possibility. I believe the actual statistic was somewhere north of 80% chance that you are going to be an illiterate adult.
Oh, and there's also a very good probability that you'll be not joining a college of your choice, but a prison of your choice.
Yes, and let's face it, in both of these cities, you have very high crime rates. You have a very high rate of recidivism in both of those cities. So, yeah, we're talking about an entire generation with a very bleak future in these cities.
Oh, and that wasn't really a joke about
No.
prison. That's true. Um, the thing that's also not a joke is, that. Please help me out with this, Doctor Lopkin. Nixon, who I'm sorry to say I really do many things he did, I like, some I don't. However, he started the Department of Education, and you know what? How we ranked, let's say, in the 25 most developed countries in the world, Doctor Lopkin. Do you know where
Yeah,
America ranked?
we were very highly ranked until
Maybe
the gov
third, fourth,
yeah, until the
who knows?
government decided to get involved in
And you
education.
know where we are now,
I
Doctor
believe
Lopkin?
25th, somewhere around there.
And you're a very smart person. Can you tell me 25 developed countries? Because I kind of can't.
No, I can't rattle them off. It
It's
is really sad, and the fact of the matter is that there was a brilliant book called Rules for Radicals, and this is what the left has used since the 1970s to destroy the educational system. And now we've got kids that can't read, can't do math.
can't also make sound political decisions. Another perfect scenario for rules for radicals.
Yes.
And if you, well, I mean, also on the political realm of things, we have, well, one of my least favorite political figures for various reasons, Bernie Sanders. I can kind of understand this because he really never worked. He still hasn't worked a day in his life. Proposed a 4-day work week, everyone being paid the same. I do you think he's ever taken an economics
Okay.
class? Because I believe that may contribute to hyperinflation.
Actually, I have to push back on you on this one because the concept is not as crazy as it sounds. They have been running an experiment in Britain for a 4-day work week. They worked with a number of companies that implemented it. And what they found was productivity actually rose. And a number of those companies, even after the experiment ends, are already planning on keeping it in place. So even a broken clock is right twice a day. He might have actually hit on something with this.
Well, I'm a little more leery of it for two reasons. You already have a lot of displaced workers, people not entering the work. So basically, people are disconnected, literally and figuratively, in the workforce already. It's not the time to throw new this new monkey in the machine.
Well, one of the things that they did see is, for the 4-day work week to work in Britain, people went back to the office.
Well,
Here
then
we've
that's good.
we've got a whole bunch of people that, they're whining, they don't want to go back to the office. Disney's telling them they have to come back. Apple's telling them they have to come back. Companies all across the country are saying, nope, you have to be in the office at least 3 days, and they're whining about it. And actually, there was a study that 50% of college graduates are not emotionally prepared to handle a 9 to 5 job. This is what our educational system
Whoa,
has
whoa,
done
whoa,
to
whoa,
the
whoa, whoa, whoa,
workforce.
whoa. I didn't really have that option, Doctor Lopkin,
No,
to
none of
be
us
I had
did.
to friggin' do it, or else guess what? There's nowhere to live or eat. Hello.
Exactly. But they're not emotionally prepared to handle a full-time job. It's like, well, guess what? It's time to put your big boy pants on and join the
Are we
workforce.
capable of that anymore? No, I'm serious
I
about that. That's
I
not a
don't
rhetorical question.
honestly, I don't know. We
And
have
wait,
just
let me. I got to ask you another question. I I need your help on this. And could it bode well, let's say, for boomers who are past the age of retirement? Because at least you can friggin' count on them. I don't
well,
know the answer, but
we
God, some.
actually are seeing a trend of retired baby boomers coming back into the workforce. So, I mean, it's possible, but
But I mean, it's
this
not
is what
sustainable. I get all that
no,
part. I mean, yes, it's a snapshot. But I mean, are, and competing globally. I mean, help me out emotionally, technically, skill set levels, communication wise. It ain't looking too good, kid.
it's not. But fortunately, we are seeing some trends with Gen Z. They're not going to 4-year colleges. They're entering the workforce with associate's degrees or professional certifications, and they're not falling for a lot of the brainwashing that typifies the millennial
Dr.
generation.
Lopkin, as always, you may be onto a trend. Um, in Connecticut, let's just say the non prestigious state universities are facing significant, not off the cliff, but appreciable, that's a better word, enrollment declines. Did you know that, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, but you're seeing increased enrollment at community
There's,
colleges.
I think that's a great sign.
Yes.
And I did
Um,
think what you articulated, got a year ago, and I've actually shared this with people off the podcast that, yeah, you're an employer and you see someone, I don't know, a 20-year-old person, he or she, and they, let's just say, went to the buffet of skills. How do you like that one? The buffet of skills and picked up, let's say, communicate, writing skills, presentation skills, technical skills, STEM skills. I'm thinking, and I'm really being serious.
yep.
Then I see someone who went to some, Carl University, and they saw, whatever, human development course and art history. I'm thinking, hey, this person really knows. This person has a work ethic, not the art history. The other person who went to the skill buffet.
Yes.
Do
You're
you think it's a
seeing
trend?
I think it is because first of all, Gen Z, and now they're calling the next generation Gen Alpha, which at this point are 11-year-olds. But both of these generations are looking at the millennials who will probably never be able to pay off all the student debt they took because not only did they go to high priced colleges where they didn't learn any useful skills, they went for master's degrees and doctorate degrees
And
without
why do you
you.
think they went to the masters and doctorates? I have an idea why.
Honestly, I think it's brainwashing.
No, I think it's
This is
postpone the inevitable
well,
because
that
you're
could
not
be too. Yes.
mentally, emotionally prepared to put your big boy pants on and your big girl skirt on. So you just delay it's perpetual youth. The keg party never ends.
That's very possible. But as a result, you've got people who have no real skills. And part of the problem is this is the generation that got awards for participating. And they thought their entire life was going to be like that. All they would have to do is show up and they would be celebrated. Well, the real world doesn't work like that. So now they're trying to get jobs as social media influencers, and they can't make ends meet that way, but they don't want to actually create anything or build anything or have a product or
Yeah,
service
but
that's
they see
actually
that, as you're
needed.
saying, they see that as role model. You get AOC, a
Yes.
buffoon who's just a TikTok idiot with happens to be a congressperson. You look at TikTok, I don't because at least they have at least an IQ above like 70. You see, and a whole generation is addicted to it. I mean, so that's pretty much they're not looking at authors of great novels, pieces of literature, amazing documentaries. Everything's fluff, and you get
Uh,
paid a shitload of
well,
money for fluff.
and you know what though? That's an important thing. People always yell, "Oh, well, CEOs are overpaid." The average CEO reads 20 at least 25 books a year. The average American who's not a CEO reads an average of 0 books a year. This is why
I don't
see
flinch at that, but I think it's bigger than that. I think forget about college or no college or whatever. People used to read, and here's the thing about reading: anyone can Google some Google shit like was George Washington a good leader? Okay, no, he wasn't. He was a blah 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 blah. When you read books, you formulate your own. You
exactly.
develop critical thinking skills, which is completely missing. That's how you have creativity. That's how you have the Disney of old, not the
Even
woke
even
Disney of
more
now.
even more importantly though, it's not about reading a book and forming an opinion. It's about reading multiple books
No,
and
I agree with that. Yes.
seeing where the connections are made. And when you Google a fact, all you get is the fact. But when you read 3 or 4 different books, and they don't even necessarily have to be on the same topic, your brain starts making the connections. This is why in 2022, I read 100 books. Now, I probably won't get to that point again this year, but I'm certainly going to get close. And it is crucial to my business and my success because I'm taking all of the ideas from these books and I'm making connections. And even some of those books were fictional books. Even the fictional books gave me an insight into the history of the time.
Oh
So,
no, there's no question about it. And by being told that's what happens with dogs. Okay, sit, stand, roll over. That doesn't develop critical thinking. Reading books does when you have to develop and formulate your own ideas. And I think it's missing. And I think that's not just for the United States. I think it's missing in a lot of Western countries and areas. Um, Speaking of missing, we have nutcases on both sides of the aisle. We have what Taylor Greene, the GO. She was
uh,
once on the fringe. Now she's becoming a more
now she's
mainstream.
lost it.
She talked about America needs a divorce, red and blue, I guess. Yeah, red.
And
She does not help the GOP by any stretch of the
no,
imagination.
she doesn't. What I find absolutely hysterical, though, is she came up with this crackpot idea. And of course, the liberals in the mainstream media ran with it. But not 3 or 4 days before, Keith Olbermann basically said the same thing, saying blue states had to declare an economic civil war against the red states. Nobody covered it. So you've got the wackos on both sides saying they need the same thing, and yet the mainstream media only covers the ones against them.
Well, two things on that. Keith Olbermann, believe it or not, I used to actually watch on MSNB. He was entertaining. He has some issues. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not a
Yeah.
therapist. He's been fired everywhere. The next thing he'll be working on is cable access. Not CNN, ESPN. Then he went to MSNBC. Then he went to what is it, the Al Gore's network. And now I don't know what he's doing, but what podcast or something. Who the hell knows? But yeah, it's not looking good. Speaking of not looking good, I think things are increasingly not looking good for Trump. I mean, what do you think of this? Chris Sununu, who I think could be a rising star, the governor of New Hampshire, very articulate, very even keeled, basically said, I don't know, one of the Sunday shows said, basically, this happens when you get fired. Thank you for your service, Donald, but it's time to say goodbye. What do you think of that?
Yeah, he's absolutely right. And you're hearing it from more and more Republicans. It is the Republican Party needs to move forward. And that's why Nikki Haley joined the race. She's a new generation of Republicans. And by the same token, the Democrats need a new generation of leadership. Unfortunately, their younger generation is even more radical and further to the left.
How do you say Meshuggah
Yeah,
for our Jewish
exactly.
friends out there? Yes, I agree with that 100%. And I also think, from a marketing perspective, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, he named or he put the stamp on of meatball, okay? The little Marco and all that crap, right? On DeSantis, he called him meatball. Sometimes things work in a certain time period. I think that shit, excuse my language, is over. Little Marco, Meatball, DeSantis. It's just stop it, please.
No, the Trump show is over. He's not getting the audiences. He's You're starting to see people entering the Republican primaries, for president. I don't think he can win the primaries. I think if he really had America's best interest in mind, he would pull out.
Which he does
And
not.
yeah, no, he can't get past his own ego. And that is going to be his downfall. And I'm pretty
Was
sure
his
he's
downfall too.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's not going to be the Republican candidate for
I certainly hope
president.
so because, and I don't want to harp on something, but I don't know where these polls. I know they're generic polls. Every one of my conservative friends, and I have many, not one, and they're not hiding anything from me, have no interest in having him run. None. Zippo, none. And he's crossed the Rubicon from let's just say, an aggravation to someone you just please go away. A
Yeah,
minor inconvenience to please go away.
yeah. I don't think he's going to survive the primaries. In fact, especially given Sununu's comments, I think he's going to start losing pretty early in the
I
primaries.
think you're correct, and I think it's not going to be DeSantis that blows up the whole branding thing. I think it's like a Sununu who is above because DeSantis is still a little bit on the emotion. He plays the emotional card,
No,
whatever you want to call it. But a guy like this, Sununu, can say, "All right, stop with the third grade antics. It's over, dude." And I think that would resonate like you have no idea. Well,
I, I
speaking of, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think you're absolutely right. I think the antics have worn thin on the Republican Party, and they're done with them.
Agreed. Speaking of hopefully done with, I'm sorry, I know we gave him what man political figure of the year. I don't know what the hell it was. I think we might have been drinking too heavily or whatever. But Joe Manchin, who, by the way, is now one of the most vulnerable senators up for future reelection, is now um, preaching the gospel of fiscal soundness. Uh, Hello, is there anyone? Where were you over the summer, boy genius?
Yeah, if he hadn't been taken in by Chuck Schumer and had stood his ground and not voted for the Green New Deal, we would be in a lot better shape. But he believed Schumer when Schumer said He was going to deliver votes for some important issues that Manchin stood for opening up energy fields, except
Okay,
shoot.
I need to interject. Okay, I'm sorry. There's stupidity and there's stupidity. Okay, you really believe Chucky is going to open up more opportunities in the energy field? Really?
Well, no,
I have a bridge to
Chuck
sell you.
Chuck actually had the votes to do this in the Senate. The
Yeah,
problem is he had no control over the wackos in the House
that's what
who
I'm
killed,
saying. Yes.
yes, who killed it. And Manchin should have known this.
You should have known. It's not like he's new to the game. Again, he spent more than most people are alive in the halls of government, and shame on you. He is extremely vulnerable. I think he's scared shitless, and rightfully so, and probably too early. I'm not a political advisor, but I would tell him you want to kind of lay low a little bit because the more people see you, they're too quickly reminded of your F up. Am I correct?
Um, I'm not 100% sure because he has been working to fix his screw up. He has sided with the Republicans in the Senate to halt a lot of the bullshit that they're trying to push through. Now, of course, there's no danger in him doing that because anything the Senate Democrats push through isn't going to get past the House. So he's got that buffer. But I think he realizes how badly he screwed up, how badly they played him for a fool, and he is trying to fix the problem.
Well, I would say if you had a party in high school and because you've invited the wrong people over and your house got destroyed, yeah, you kind of realize you screw up, but it may
Uh,
be too late. We will see. I don't know
yes.
the answer to that. I do know the answer of one thing is the Rolling Stones, and we had on our terrestrial show. I played you some clips and even blew your mind. We were at the same concert in, I believe it was 1989 or 90, Shea Stadium. Is it please time to cease and desist? Please, no, do me a favor. I don't ask a lot in life in my old age, but please stop.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones are going back into the studio to
Oy,
record
oy, oy.
new music, w- being joined by Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr.
What is their
And
new group called? The Pallbearers?
oh, I mean,
You remember the thing
if
on
we
like
want to,
Abbey Road when the whole thing
yes.
was 28 should have been? Well, don't do that because it might actually happen. Stop it. Don't even think of it.
Well, they are going back into the studio. We'll see what comes out of it. But this is actually not the first time these folks have worked together. They did some collaboration back in the '60s. I think this is,
Maybe
less
the Swan
less.
Song.
I think it could be the swan song. I think it's less about making new music and going back out on tour than it is let's have some fun with this, and doesn't
Agreed.
matter if it makes any money because they're all
Well, they're
well,
not going to make any money. That I
you know
guarantee. Sales will be the best of carnivore radio could do better. Essentially, it's pretty bad. Now, speaking of not doing any worse, California exceeds itself all the time. Gavin Newsom, who I can't take credit for, I forgot his name. He's really funny. He has a podcast. Was saying that he looks like something right out of Central Casting. You know, Mr. Smith goes to Washington, but he is dumber than rocks and more incompetent than some farm animals. He turned a surplus, an expected surplus in California of a appreciable number, by the way, okay, of yes, a California surplus of over 100 billion is now a $7 billion deficit. Please tell me how, unless Johnny Depp who blew a half a billion in his own personal finance. Unless he's at the helm, I don't know how that happens.
yeah, the federal government in the American Rescue Plan bailed out
Artificially, yes.
California
Hid the
and
warts.
and provided them with $100 billion budget surplus. And in the space of 1 year, they're now expecting for 2023 to have over a $10 billion deficit. So $110 billion have vanished. And what does California have to show for it? They have open air drug markets, a massive homeless problem,
Oh
people
yeah. By the way,
fleeing.
someone I knew who went to San Francisco, let's say 10 years ago, said you wouldn't. It's you cannot recognize it.
Oh, yeah, it's unrecognizable. Businesses are fleeing. People are fleeing. And that's actually part of the reason for the deficit is they're losing their tax base because they wasted this money and didn't fix it, made their problems worse. And now, instead of spending that money on, say, refunding the police and getting crime under control or dealing with the homeless problem, they want to spend taxpayer money on reparations.
Seems like a good, prudent example of fiscal responsibility to me, and also having no gas-powered cars being able to be sold by 2033. That also sounds pretty stable to me.
Which by the way, they don't have an electrical grid that's capable of
Oh no,
handling
it
the
would crash.
electric
It's on the verge
vehicles.
of crashing now.
Yes, it's on the
Other
verge of
than that,
crashing. So, but
other than
they're
that,
not going
how'd
to
you like?
put the yeah, they're
Other
not
than
going to
that,
put
how'd
the
you like
money
to
into
play,
fixing
Mrs.
it.
Lincoln? Yes, very
Exactly.
good. Well, Dr. Lopkin, great show. We're on a roll. We've been gaining listeners, I believe.
We have. And of course, you can catch every
Rightfully
episode.
so.
You can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at the Carnivore Radio website, xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.